Senior Minister of State, Dr. Maliki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vivian spoke about Singapore's main foreign policy priorities. I will elaborate on Singapore's relations with countries in the region and beyond. For good reasons, we place great importance on engaging our regional neighbors. Our future is inextricably linked to the region. A peaceful and stable Southeast Asia is a necessary condition for Singapore's security and prosperity. ASEAN is our largest trading partner with 630 million people and a combined GDP of $2.55 trillion in 2016. In 2016, Singapore's trade with ASEAN amounted to $217.1 billion, more than a quarter of Singapore's total trade. Last year, around a third, or 6.2 million, of our total visit arrivals came from ASEAN. We see tremendous potential and opportunities in our region as ASEAN is expected to become the fourth largest economy in the world with a GDP of $10 trillion by 2030. With 60% of ASEAN's population under the age of 35, there are also demographic dividends to be reaped. Therefore, we have pursued collaborative relations with our Southeast Asian neighbors, in particular the provinces and regions outside the capitals of our two closest neighbors. Malaysia and Indonesia are large dynamic markets. There are opportunities to deepen our engagement at the state and provincial levels. We have had visits by leaders from Sabah, Sarawak, and Johor, as well as from Jambi, North Sumatra, and Capri. We have visited places like Malacca, Perak, South Sumatra, and West Java. There is much unfamiliarity with Singapore in these places, and vice versa, especially among the youth. It is important to understand our neighbors at the local level and provide opportunities for them to know us. What happens at the local level have impact on the national politics and economies. Some provincial leaders have also taken higher office at the national level. There are also potential economic opportunities in these states and regions for our businesses. Given our close proximity, Singapore cannot be immune. For instance, I've met entrance students as well as undergraduates in Riau and Jambi. The students were keen to discuss various topics ranging from maintaining religious and racial harmony to the Singapore education system. Both the students and I come away richer from having better understood each other's perspectives. Mr. Baey Yam Keng asked about our relations with other Southeast Asian countries. We keep our regular high-level exchanges to deepen bilateral ties. Last November, President Halimah Yacob attended the royal cremation ceremony of His Majesty the late King Bhumipol Adul Yajef of Thailand. Prime Minister visited Philippines and Vietnam twice last year. ESM Goh Chok Tong and Minister Vivian visited Myanmar, while Minister Vivian also made introductory visits to Philippines and Cambodia. We hosted Lao Prime Minister Dr. Tangloun Sisulit, as well as senior Vietnamese leaders. I also visited Brunei twice last year, including for Hari Raya open houses. We have been doing this for several years now, and our friends from Brunei likewise visit Singapore during their Hari Raya season. Such interactions are also provide opportunities for Singapore companies venturing in the region. For example, the avoidance of double taxation agreements with Laos and Cambodia came into force last year. We are also in the process of negotiating a bilateral investment treaty with Myanmar, which will give better protection for our companies. IE Singapore recently signed an MOU with the Philippines Bases Conversion Development Authority for Singapore to participate in the development of the new Clark City. While Southeast Asia remains a cornerstone of Singapore's foreign policy, we should not lose sight of important regions elsewhere. In this globalized world, events elsewhere also affect Singapore. I will talk about three regions in particular: South Asia, Africa, and Middle East. First, South Asia. In response to Mr. Liang Yinghua and Mr. Murali Pillai, South Asia enjoys long-standing linkages to Southeast Asia. Politically, South Asia is an important part of the larger Indo-Pacific region, which adjoins Southeast Asia. Economically, the region is driving growth in Asia. South Asia's GDP is fast approaching $3 trillion. Our relationship with India remains broad-based and deep. Singapore is India's 10th largest trading partner and second largest foreign investor. We have made steady progress through the India-Singapore strategic partnership, particularly in skills development and smart cities. We also worked with our economic agencies to support our company's expansion efforts in India. For example, PSA inaugurated the Bharat Mumbai Container Terminals, which is now India's largest container terminal. In keeping with India's moves to digitalize its economy, we are also exploring new areas of cooperation, such as in fintech. India's technology startup scene is fast developing, with over 5,000 tech startups in 2017 alone. Singaporean startups such as Akanto, Shopmatic, and Vicens are venturing into India to tap on its potential. With the decentralization of the government in India, we have actively engaged individual states, such as Maharashtra, to support Singapore's business interests. Following the state's Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis' visit to Singapore last year, a joint working group to share expertise and speed up investment proposals was proposed. We have also been supporting the development of Andhra Pradesh's new capital city, Amaravati. India's Act East policy has put spotlight on connecting the northeast of India to Southeast Asia. We have launched a third skills center in Guwahati, Assam, last year, after Delhi and Udaipur. Singapore's experience in technical and vocational training is helping India upskill its youth and support our business interests. We recently signed the FTA with Sri Lanka during PM's visit to Colombo. This is Sri Lanka's first modern and comprehensive FTA that not only highlights the economic opportunities, but also provides savings for Singapore's companies. Bangladesh has also significant potential. Singapore contributed the highest net inflow of FDI to Bangladesh in the past 2 years. Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will visit us in a few weeks. We will discuss economic cooperation and investments by Singapore and Bangladesh companies. Next, Africa. Africa is a vast continent of 54 countries that we cannot ignore. While many of us may be unfamiliar with Africa, you'll be surprised how many Africans know about Singaporeans and Singapore. I'm constantly reminded during my trips to Africa of Singapore's reputation there and the goodwill and trust that Africans have of us. Many leaders from these countries have told me that they have all read founding Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew's memoirs and want to learn more from us. As Africa grows, we seek to position Singapore to take advantage of the economic opportunities. Africa's GDP is expected to reach $3 trillion by 2030. Our trade with Africa has been going strong, reaching 8 billion Singapore dollars in 2017, an increase of 13% from 2016. This year, we will host the third high-level ministerial exchange visit from Africa, which will focus on how Singapore can partner Africa in smart city development. We are working to put in place key economic frameworks, such as the avoidance of double taxation agreements and bilateral investment treaties, so that Singapore companies will find it easier to do business in Africa. We are also making progress in aviation connectivity. Ethiopian Airlines relaunched flights to Addis Ababa, in addition to direct flights to Mauritius and South Africa. Expanded air links will help boost business and tourism. Professor Fazlima Latif asked about our engagement in the Middle East. It remains an important region for Singapore for several fronts. Singapore's total trade with the Middle East grew by about 24% to $52.7 billion last year. Economic reforms in many Middle East countries provide unprecedented opportunities. For instance, Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 and National Transformation Program 2020 beholds bold and comprehensive reforms to diversify its economy from oil to open up the country. Our companies can tap on opportunities in areas such as infrastructure development, healthcare, and smart technologies. There is also a good momentum in economic exchanges with the UAE, our largest trading partner in the region. A Singapore company, Rotary Engineering, won a contract to build 12 storage tanks for Dubai's Emirates National Oil Company, increasing storage capacity by 50%. Last year, the UAE Embassy in Singapore, the Singapore Business Federation, and the Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce and Industry set up the UAE Singapore Business Council to link up companies and investors. Our presence in the Middle East extends to North Africa and Central Asia. My visit to Lebanon in May 2017 marked the first visit by a Singapore political office holder to Lebanon since 1974. We rekindled our ties with the Lebanese leadership and agreed to explore cooperation in areas of shared interests such as counterterrorism and technical cooperation. This year, I plan to bring a business delegation to Morocco to explore prospects of economic collaboration. A few days ago, Singapore and Tunisia signed an avoidance of double taxation agreement. Besides this, we continue to engage Iran. At the political level, I visited Iran last year, and the Singapore Business Federation has mounted business missions to explore Iranian market. For Central Asia, I met both the mayors of Astana and Almaty during their visits to Singapore last year. They had promising discussions with Singapore companies to explore economic ties in Kazakhstan. Our people-to-people ties with the Middle East are strengthening. The number of Singaporeans traveling to, living, studying, or working in the Middle East is increasing. Wherever I've traveled, I've met many who have visited and spoke fondly of Singapore. Our universities have many exchange programs with the Middle East. Over 500 students have participated in the SMU's business study missions to the GCC countries. The NUS Overseas College in Israel has also allowed many to experience Israel's economic, dynamic business and entrepreneurship culture. In 2007, NUS's Middle East Institute has promoted a deeper understanding of the region by regularly inviting academics and experts from the Middle East for lectures and workshops since 2007. Our engagements in the Middle East take place against a backdrop of a dynamic and complex region with rapid developments. Events unfolding in the region reverberate across the world. Last year alone, we saw Gulf diplomatic crisis and the Israeli-Palestine issue erupt. I had the opportunity to listen to different sides involved in the disputes. Singapore respects their position, and we do not take sides. It is our hope that all parties will be able to resolve their differences amicably. Singapore has maintained our consistent and principled position to uphold international law and support the peaceful resolutions of disputes, including on the Israeli-Palestine conflict. This has always been our approach, regardless of the vagaries of Middle East politics. Minister Vivian had explained in January 2018 Singapore's vote in favor of the UN National Assembly resolution on the status of Jerusalem. Singapore's vote was based on a key principle of Singapore's foreign policy, which is the promotion of a rules-based global community governed by the rule of international law, including abiding by UN Security Council resolutions and the peaceful resolution of disputes. We voted in favor of the resolution as it affirms previous UN resolutions, rejects any decisions or actions which purport to alter the character and status of Jerusalem, and calls for all states to comply with existing UN Security Council resolutions on Jerusalem. Before this, we had also voted in favor of UN General Assembly Resolution 37/123C in 1982, which deplored the relocation of diplomatic missions to Jerusalem, which was a violation of UN Security Council Resolution 478, 1980. Any unilateral and premature action that might alter the status of Jerusalem will impede progress towards a just and durable solution to the Israeli-Palestine conflict. The future status of Jerusalem should be decided through direct negotiations between Israel and Palestinians. Let me elaborate in Malay, Mr. Chairman.
The status of Jerusalem is a complex and sensitive issue with a long history. Any unilateral and premature action that might alter the status of Jerusalem will only serve to further destabilize the region, thus impeding progress towards a just and durable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The future status of Jerusalem must be decided through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. Singapore maintains good relations with both Israel and Palestine. We have called on both sides to resume direct negotiations and make progress towards a just and durable solution to the conflict. Therefore, during the recent United Nations General Assembly, Singapore voted to support the UN resolution which rejects any decisions or actions which purport to alter the character and status of Jerusalem. This is consistent with Singapore's decision to vote in favor of a similar resolution in 1982, which deplored the relocation of diplomatic missions to Jerusalem. Our long-standing view is that a two-state solution will help to bring peace and security to both peoples. Singapore's unwavering position on this issue has enabled us to be taken seriously and regarded as a reliable partner that can play a constructive role in international affairs.
Mr. Chairman, our interest in the Middle East also stems from mutual interests to counter religious extremism together. I just returned from Kuwait, where the global coalition to defeat the ISIS or the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria discussed how we can build on our successes and continue cooperating to eliminate terrorism. Singapore has played an important role in the region's counter-terrorism efforts, lending early support to the Defeat ISIS coalition. We are the first Southeast Asian country to join the coalition and the only Asian country to have contributed both military assets and personnel to anti-ISIS efforts. Ultimately, our contributions toward the security and stability of the Middle East will help keep Singapore safe and secure. Ms. Joan Pereira asked how Singapore Cooperation Programme supports Singapore's engagement with other countries. Through the SCP, we have shared Singapore's development experience with over 177,000 foreign officials from all over. The SCP participants form a reservoir of goodwill and support for Singapore in international fora, as well as their home countries. Past SCP participants include Laos Prime Minister Dr. Tangloun Sulutsith and several current leaders, ministers, mayors, and governors of neighboring countries. The SCP gives us a useful platform to broaden our cooperation with other countries. We have joint training partnerships with developed countries like the US and Japan, as well as developing countries like Thailand and Argentina for countries in the region and beyond. Given the growing number of Singaporeans living and traveling overseas, Mr. Ong Teng Koon's question on their role in advocating for Singapore is timely. In today's globalized and digitalized environment, foreign affairs is no longer the privileged purview of professional diplomats alone. Increasingly, Singaporeans, especially those living abroad, play a role too. When overseas, our citizens may often be asked to explain Singapore's policies and actions. To do so effectively, an open mind and a friendly disposition helps to bridge differences. We do not seek to impose our views on others. By the same token, we must be conscious of who we are and defend what we stand for. We are an independent, sovereign, multiracial country in Southeast Asia. We are not a Chinese, Indian, or Malay state, and we must never act based on ethnic or religious identity. When we deal with a foreign country, whether in business or in social settings, we should stand firm against external pressures and influences that undermine our national identity, interests, and values. How tall and strong Singapore stands in the international community depends on our unity and our own unity and cohesiveness. Whether our people are in Singapore or abroad should make no difference. On our part, as we expand our space, secure our position, and advance our interests internationally, MFA will continue to engage Singaporeans overseas. Our embassies regularly organize activities to stay in touch with local Singaporeans and keep them updated on developments in Singapore. Mr. Chairman, I will now turn the floor to MOS Sam Tan to continue.